Captain's log, stardate 3045.6.
Best known for his dynamic portrayal of the dashing Captain Kirk, William Shatner is one of the few actors in history to become a cultural icon. As handsome as he is headstrong, Shatner has lived according to his own set of rules.
I get excited about things easily.
He comes bouncing off the walls every now and then as a result of his passion.
Bill is a very inner-motivated person, very inner-directed, and very persevering.
To me, he's my father who happens to work, you know, in outer space, I guess.
William Shatner was born on March 22, 1931 in Montreal, Canada. He was a mischievous, fun-loving boy and a natural extrovert.
My mother, he and I were walking along our downtown area, and suddenly Billy disappeared. And we finally found him dancing to the organ grinder. Billy had everybody watching him and dancing with him and laughing with him, and he loved performing in front of that organ grinder.
Billy's father, Joseph, was a self-made man who owned a clothing business. Joseph's parents were Jewish immigrants who moved to Canada from Eastern Europe in the early 1900s. Shatner's mother, Anne, was from Montreal. She was a university graduate and taught diction before staying home to raise 3 children. In the early 30s, Canada, like the rest of the world, was still in the throes of the Great Depression. But the Shatners were doing well enough to send their children to summer camp in the mountains north of Montreal. And that's where Billy discovered his love of acting, at the tender age of 6.
And they had a play called Winterset. And both Billy and I were in the play.
I looked out. People were weeping. They're weeping. Something I did made them weep. And I got a little crazy. Wow, I did that.
From that point on, he was hooked. He made his professional acting debut at the Montreal Children's Theatre at the ripe old age of 8. And on weekends, he performed on radio.
Lies My Father Told Me, a play by Ted Allen, heard in the cast, William Shatner.
He was exposed to the theater early and given a sense of ambition, I think, by his mother.
It's genetic. My mother was a bit of a clown and never really pursued her acting in a professional way, but she had talent.
His mother, I think, dreamed that her son would be a star one day.
He used the power of his voice to create moods. When he wasn't working, Billy practiced on his sister's friends.
Bill was a prankster, and I remember when I would have little parties, birthday parties, my brother would come in the middle and start telling ghost stories and close the lights and make everyone scared to death.
Billy was a well-known radio star by the time he entered Montreal's West Hills High School. Acting was already his first love, but athletic competition came a close second. He joined the school ski club and both the wrestling and football teams. His fierce temper surfaced at an early age.
I was listening to the radio, and there was a hockey game being broadcast, and Billy was ringing the doorbell to come in to listen, and I did not hear the doorbell, and he kept ringing and ringing, and I still didn't hear it. And so he broke into a window on the side and came in and practically killed me. He was so upset. So we had a little bit of a temper.
In the summer of 1948, 17-year-old Bill volunteered at a B'nai B'rith summer camp for disadvantaged children. Many of the young campers were survivors of World War II, orphans who had lost their families in the Nazi Holocaust. His experience with those children was an important part of Shatner's development.
It stretched us a great deal. You had to grow up very fast, taking care of kids who needed you in a parental role, in some cases rather desperately.
Billy had always wanted to be an actor, but his father expected his only son to follow in the family business. He dutifully spent time working in the company's shipping department and majored in commerce at Montreal's McGill University. but Shatner's heart was in the theater, and he spent most of his time directing and producing college plays. It was pretty clear to everyone, including his father, that the only business that interested Bill Shatner was show business.
My father made a deal with Bill and said, after a year, if you try out acting and it's not successful, will you come back into the clothing business? And Billy said, yes, of course I will.
But Shatner never looked back. In 1951, he moved from Montreal to Ottawa, Ontario, to join the Canadian National Repertory Theatre. His paycheck was all of about $31 a week. It was enough to pay the rent, but not enough to splurge on other things he needed, like food.
I've gone hungry. I've gone hungry and slept on rope mattresses, no worse than a lot of people. But the humor was that I was appearing in front of a lot of people. It looked very glamorous to be an actor, but in fact I was struggling to eat. That went on for a long time.
In 1953, he moved from Ottawa to Toronto, Ontario, to join the prestigious Stratford Shakespeare Festival. His salary was only $80 a week, but the acting experience was worth a fortune. Over the next 3 years, he trained in the classics, learning 100 different parts in 60 different plays. When the Canadian actors took a lavish production of the play Tamburlaine the Great to New York, Shatner caught the attention of a studio talent scout. But he wasn't about to be tempted by Hollywood just yet. The struggling young actor turned down a lucrative movie offer to remain in the theater where he could develop his skills and control the parts he played. He returned to Canada and was the understudy for the future acting great Christopher Plummer in Henry V.
One day they came to me and said, "Chris Azale, you have to go on," in the early afternoon. I said, could I at least run through it with the rest of the cast? Because I had learned the lines in Montreal in my bathroom. I'd sit in the toilet and learn my lines. But I'd never said the lines on stage.
But there was no time for rehearsal, and the 25-year-old understudy hit the Shakespearean stage cold.
Bill stepped in and did a wonderful job on very short notice as Chris Plummer's stand-in. That made it unambiguous that he was on his way to something big.
Things were on the upswing for young Shatner. He married an actress named Gloria Rand. The newlyweds met while co-starring in a CBC drama that Shatner had written. They moved to New York in 1956 during the golden age of television. Over the next 10 years, Shatner made more than 100 television shows, including this Studio One production with another up-and-comer named Steve McQueen.
He proved to be really good at what was then premier American television, live television. No tape in those days. It was Hallmark Hall of Fame, Studio One, Westinghouse. Their shows were live to air. You performed it and it went over the TV camera to air, and he proved to be very good at that.
Hollywood took notice again, and when he was 26, he signed a contract with MGM worth $100,000. He earned good reviews for his first movie, The Brothers Karamazov, with Yul Brynner. In 1958, he was working when he received word that his first child, daughter Leslie, was born. The new father was about to hit the acting big time in the Broadway play Susie Wong. Starring on Broadway was a dream that quickly turned into an actor's nightmare. He fought bitterly with his relatively inexperienced co-star, France Nguyen, and some of the early reviews were terrible. The play was originally produced as a heavy drama, but Shatner helped take it in another direction, toward lighthearted comedy, and the play became a hit. The two stars appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, and Shatner was named Best Actor of both the Theatre Guild and the Theatre World Awards. In 1961, his second daughter, Elizabeth, was born, and Shatner went back to Broadway with Julie Harris and Walter Matthau in the hit A Shot in the Dark. He was still trying to break into films, but television helped pay the bills. Shatner starred in The Twilight Zone as well as Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where he turned in a strong performance as a weakling.
Lottie, I don't know what to do. I just don't.
Tell her.
I can't.
Then you've already chosen her.
No.
Yes.
He wanted to avoid being locked into a regular television series, and he turned down the lead in Dr. Kildare. In 1964, his third daughter, Melanie, was born, and he appeared in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. with another soon-to-be familiar face.
Excuse me?
Pardon me, I'm terribly sorry.
Is there some trouble?
Yes, my friend is overtrained a little bit.
Calvin Coolidge, how are you, Cal, baby? Want a taste?
Listen, I think you've had enough for tonight, Mr. Donfield. Let me see you home, all right?
That's a democratic spirit, brother.
That's
democratic
right.
spirit. Bless you all, bless you and you and you.
That's right. You're right about that. Top donkey.
It would be 2 years before he would work with Leonard Nimoy again. In the meantime, Shatner soldiered on to play Alexander the Great in an epic TV production. He got good reviews for his first television series, For the People, but the show was short-lived. Although he was now a seasoned professional and getting good parts, the 35-year-old actor was frustrated by his inability to break through to the big time, and he was feeling the pressure of family responsibilities.
I had kids and a wife and a dog and a car, and $1,800 seemed to be the glass ceiling for me. I could get well below that, but I could never get above it. I remember thinking, I've got to get more than $1,800 ahead here. So art and commerce were vying with each other even at that moment.
Bill's ambitions were soaring to the stars, and that's when a television producer named Gene Roddenberry came calling. In September of 1966, Star Trek materialized on television, starring William Shatner as Captain Kirk. It was a dismal debut. The critics were cold, the ratings were bleak, and NBC nearly pulled the plug after the first 3 months. For the late series creator Gene Roddenberry, the poor reception hit close to home.
My own father, he sat there the first night Star Trek was on the air, and he waited and saw the whole thing. They went out and apologized to all the neighbors.
Shatner was actually the second captain to command the Starship Enterprise. NBC rejected Gene Roddenberry's first pilot with Jeffrey Hunter in the leading role.
Definitely something out there, Captain. Headed this way.
All of the cast from that pilot, except for Leonard Nimoy, was replaced. William Shatner and DeForest Kelley joined the crew.
The infection's begun to drain already.
Dr. McCoy, you may yet cure the common cold.
If there ever was a time to get out of here, it's now.
When Bill came on and when Dee came on, it became much clearer to me what the possibilities were of how we could interact with each other. And I guess it worked.
Then we've got him.
Shatner was only 35 years old, but he was already one of the most successful and experienced actors on board the Enterprise.
Bill, with a very energetic and very proactive kind of performance, creates opportunities for other people to find their place around that.
Producers were distracted, working round the clock trying to write the show. The actors became advocates for their own characters and jockeyed for position. Secondary cast members felt resentful about how they were being treated, but the competitive tension was most intense between Shatner and Nimoy.
I'd like you to teach me that sometime.
Take D'Artagnan here to sickbay.
At first, Spock was supposed to be a secondary character, but the audience responded strongly to the Vulcan officer, and his role was enlarged. The problem was, Shatner was not used to sharing the spotlight.
Something the matter, Mr. Spock?
When he became popular, it made me feel insecure.
We had a relationship that was very much like two brothers with a father figure who would at best have been Gene Roddenberry, and who really didn't quite know how to deal with us. We were extremely energetic and extremely aggressive about expressing our ideas, and sometimes there was a conflict. Because I would come into Gene and say, there's a great opportunity for me to do such and such here. If you give me the chance, I can whatever. Or there's a problem that I have here.
It's never been done.
Don't tell me that again, science officer!
I'd leave the room, and in comes Bill with his agenda, you know, and Roddenberry is kind of, well, trying to please both sides and trying to keep the peace. And that didn't always work very well.
You've got to hear me!
And we'd have to work through it just like any family members would.
The two characters became like brothers. Their relationship created the heart and the humor of the show.
You're right, Mr. Jones. They don't like Klingons. But they do like Vulcans. Why, Mr. Spock, I didn't know you had it in you.
Obviously, Tribbles are very perceptive creatures, Captain.
Obviously.
As I came to learn, such a valuable lesson. The more writers write for an alternate character, the better it is for everybody, because it makes a better show and more intricate things happen. So if I didn't think of it right away, I thought of it later on.
Shatner's single-minded focus on his work eventually made a shambles of his personal life. The shooting schedule demanded an exhausting series of 12-hour days. The script was often in the middle of changing or was incomplete.
The pressure was intense when we were making those shows. The budget was so limited that you were practically working a slave ship. You know, the question was, do you tip the drum beater here? You know, I mean, you're working your butt off. You know.
On weekends, Shatner disappeared into the desert to let off steam with a motorcycle.
He would go off on weekends and come back bruised and slashed. He was forever running into tree branches and bramble bushes and God knows what else. And if you asked him what had happened, he would talk about this great event that he'd had, this great experience that he'd had. I was coming around a turn, I suddenly swiveled and the bike went out from under me and I crashed into the thing and I got back on the bike and went down the, you know, that's Bill.
Shatner thrived on doing as many of his own stunts as possible, which also helped keep him in shape for the unforgivingly tight uniforms. But the grueling work had an unexpected consequence. Many years later, doctors discovered that his hearing had probably been permanently damaged by an on-set explosion. His daughters often visited the set, and he let his girls work on one of the shows in order to teach them a lesson.
I remember it being long days, and I later found out Dad wanted it to be sort of, you know, long and hard for us, so we'd get a really good taste of what acting was like, so we wouldn't want to be, you know, an actress. I remember this kind of weird paint smell, paper mache paint, acrylic kind of smell, and I remember touching the rocks, you know, those rocks that they'd throw.
You know, you look at them picking up the plastic rocks, you know, they're like, they pick them up and they're like, you know.
For the Shatner girls, the line between fact and fiction was understandably confusing.
That giant lizard episode, I thought that the lizard was really real, you know. He was sitting with me watching the episode on TV, and I got really scared and I started to cry because I thought that he was really getting hurt, you know.
I'm so frightened, Captain. I'm so very frightened.
Captain Kirk had a love interest in nearly every show, but when mind-controlling aliens forced him to kiss Lieutenant Uhura, it was a moment in television history.
I am not afraid.
Bill and I were involved in the very first interracial kiss on television. And we got the most fan mail that we'd ever received.
Shatner was filming this episode in 1967 when he received word on the set that his father Joseph had passed away. At first, he tried to finish working on the episode, but ultimately he was too grief-stricken to continue. Shatner left to join the rest of his family and later returned to the set to recreate an important scene.
I recollect so vividly how comforting Leonard was to me. And I came back trying in some stupid way to relieve the tension of, he buried his father and how will he react. Leonard had gone on to shoot some of his own stuff, and he was yelling, pain, pain, pain.
Pain! Pain! Pain!
It's funny how little I remember of the shooting of the Star Trek series, but vividly recollect saying, "Give that man an aspirin," and everybody laughing except Leonard, who was trying his best to perform for me off screen what he had done on screen. And he was hurt, rightfully so.
Both Shatner and Nimoy capitalized on their popularity by recording albums. Shatner's included unintentionally hilarious renditions of Tambourine Man and a hit song by the Beatles.
I've got to make a point of getting his Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds because I've heard a lot about it. If it's as good as mine, he should burn it.
In 1969, Star Trek was canceled. But the heavy workload had already taken its toll on Shatner's marriage, which ended in divorce that same year. His ex-wife took custody of the children, and Shatner lost most of his money in the settlement. Broke, unemployed, alone, and depressed, he went back to his roots in regional theater. He cut his expenses by living in his camper.
Roger, we copy. It was beautiful from here. Tranquility, over.
On July 20th, 1969, the former captain of the starship Enterprise was watching television with the rest of the world when Neil Armstrong made real space history.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I was lying on my back in my little camper, at a little 2-inch television set on my chest, and I was looking at it, enthralled with what was going on. That awe and the feeling of destitution and obliteration by the fact that I was in this empty field, broke and alone. Kind of an interesting contrast.
With a man on the moon, everyone on Earth became interested in outer space. William Shatner thought he was through with Star Trek, but ironically, it was about to make him one of the most recognized people on the planet. In 1969, the television galaxy was left undefended.
Irrational, precisely.
On one hand, this wasn't Shakespeare, but with time, I think Bill quite deservedly came to be very proud of it because most of the stories were very intelligent. It was a series that had value beyond just entertainment and diversion.
For now, Star Trek was just another failed series, and William Shatner just another unemployed actor. Making matters worse, he blamed himself for having put his family second to his career.
The good part is it was fun and interesting. The bad part is he wasn't around very much, and we missed him a lot, and he was gone quite a bit.
The newly divorced Shatner moved to the East Coast to work in theater and slept in his camper.
There was a knock on the door one morning, and I opened the door sleepily. I was a theater actor. A little boy. Can I come in? Are you Captain Kirk? I said, yeah. He said, can I come into your spaceship? Okay, come on in. He said, is this your spaceship? I said, yes. I pointed to the shower, this teeny little camper. I said, that's where I materialized. Oh, that's right. I pointed to the stove. I said, those are my controls. I said, oh, wow, watch it. So I like to say that there's a 35-year-old guy going around, maybe he's a stockbroker, maybe a doctor, he's saying, I was in Captain Kirk's spaceship when I was 5 years old, and they're all thinking he's mad,
Amazing things began to happen. The show was becoming more popular than ever in reruns. Shatner himself was branching out in new directions. In 1970, he starred in a powerful Civil War drama directed by George C. Scott called The Andersonville Trial. Critics considered it one of the highlights of his career.
But this was not a military situation. Those helpless, unarmed men were not the enemy.
During filming, Shatner met a production assistant named Marcy Lafferty. They married 3 years later. Shatner was 42, Marcy was 27. In the meantime, Star Trek was beaming its way into television history. Episodes ran as many as 200 times a day in 40 different countries around the world. The studio made a fortune, but the stars were left out of the windfall. Their residual payments expired after just 5 reruns.
Coincidence? Maybe.
In the early 70s, all of the original cast had a chance to work on the embarrassingly low-tech Star Trek cartoon.
Maintain the Enterprise in this position, Sulu. If Spock and I survive, we'll return here. If not, Mr. Scott, you have your orders.
Shatner worked steadily on projects other than Star Trek, but he was having trouble shaking the Star Trek image. He appeared on television dramas, game shows, talk shows, even commercials.
Some of the fans, I guess, were a little upset when you did a margarine commercial, which perhaps was demeaning for Captain Kirk to do.
Well, for Captain Kirk, maybe, but for William Shatner, it was perfectly feasible.
By the mid-70s, Star Trek fans were lining up in pointed ears and Federation uniforms for the first Star Trek convention. Everything from buttons and books to posters and phasers went up for sale. No tribble at all.
We didn't enter through the front where Bill would be recognized and perhaps mobbed by the huge gathering. We went through a back entrance and through the bowels of that building, through the plumbing system and the heating system, back through the interior of the building and up finally to the stage where Bill would appear. I never personally understood it fully, but I found it amusing.
Shatner made a series of forgettable movies, but finally landed another television series in the mid-70s called Barbary Coast. He played a master of disguise and disappeared behind elaborate makeup each week. Unfortunately, the show itself disappeared in just 13 weeks.
NASA's reusable shuttle orbiter. This is Orbiter 101. It has been named the Enterprise.
In 1976, science fiction became science fact with the Space Shuttle Enterprise. Star Trek fans had lobbied for the name by sending NASA 400,000 letters. The show's ongoing popularity launched the real Starship Enterprise back into orbit in 1979 with Star Trek the Motion Picture. But it hadn't been easy to reunite the team. First, Paramount Studios had to settle a bitter lawsuit with Leonard Nimoy over Star Trek merchandising. The settlement benefited the whole cast.
Then my presence is to our mutual advantage.
The movie had little in common with the original series, but it was a hit anyway. Secondary cast members managed to put aside old resentments for the sake of the franchise. Shatner was still trying to carve out a career separate from Star Trek. In 1982, he started playing TV's T.J. Hooker. Bill directed some of the episodes and impressed a newcomer named Heather Locklear.
We were doing a scene and he felt something was missing and he had just realized it. And so we talk things out sometimes. It's fun.
Later that same year, Captain Kirk returned to face an old nemesis in Star Trek II.
You still remember, Admiral. I cannot help but be touched.
The second film was an even bigger hit than the first, but seemed to mark the end for Spock. No one knew if the Star Trek family could survive without one of its most popular members. But Nimoy decided to return to direct Star Trek III, and that's when he had to deal with one of Shatner's deep, dark secrets.
Jim, he can't do that.
How many fingers do I have up?
That's not very damn funny. We tied his fingers together with fishing line, almost invisible nylon line.
Laughter was always part of the Star Trek magic and was one of the primary ingredients of Star Trek IV. Off stage, Shatner was known for his wicked sense of humor.
He's a child. He's goofy. He's a practical joker. He wants to kid. He'll do anything for a laugh.
I mean, down here, there are literally hundreds and thousands of blinking, beeping, and flashing lights.
He hammed it up in Airplane 2, making fun of his own image by intentionally overacting. He went even further over the top in Loaded Weapon 1. But when he stepped on stage in 1986 for NBC's Saturday Night Live, no one was prepared for what the notorious prankster was about to do.
Having received all your letters over the years, and I've spoken to many of you, and some of you have traveled, you know, hundreds of miles to be here, I'd just like to say, get a life, will you, people? I mean...
Well, what I remember was that there was this, did you hear what Bill said on Saturday Night Live? He told the Star Trek fans to get a life.
You must be almost 30. Have you ever kissed a girl? I didn't think so. There's a whole world out there. When I was your age, I didn't watch television. I lived. So move out of your parents' basements and get your own apartments and grow the hell up. I mean, it's just a TV show, Dan, and it's just a TV show.
He told me later that he had insisted on doing it because he thought it was appropriate and funny.
So everybody, you know, set your faces on stun, because this convention's ahead, warp factor 9, you know? Right.
The uproar over the skit eventually subsided, but the world was about to discover how dysfunctional the Star Trek family had become. In the 1960s, the Star Trek television series made William Shatner famous. In the decades that followed, the Star Trek movies helped make him rich. Shatner had also developed projects apart from Star Trek, including Rescue 911, a television show about real-life heroics. In the late 1980s, Shatner directed the 5th movie in the Star Trek series. The actors managed to put aside personal differences in order to work together, but stories of backstage trouble among the cast had become something of a cottage industry. Shatner's best-selling book, Star Trek Memories, uncovered some old wounds.
Bill would say to me, God, I went to talk to Jimmy Doohan about, for my book, you know, and he hates me. Well, okay. What can you say? Bill is a power on a set. He was very powerful and very aggressive, and not necessarily in a way that was intended to damage or to injure, but because of what he felt he had to offer and what he felt was appropriate in a given moment.
I was never rude. I was never angry at anybody. I love them all. They can't be angry at me because I love them. So how can you be angry with somebody who loves you? You can be annoyed, you know, you can be a little jealous. Whatever the things are, I have no animosity.
In 1991, the captain returned to the bridge of the Starship Enterprise for Star Trek VI.
Once again, we've saved civilization as we know it.
Shatner's history came full circle in Star Trek VI when Christopher Plummer appeared as a Klingon villain.
In space, all warriors are cold warriors.
In the 1950s, the two actors had started out together at a Canadian Shakespeare company.
When I was at Stratford, he was like in the in-group. He was, you know, flamboyant, and he'd hoist a few with the guys, and I was on the outside, looking in at all these people. And so I now had an opportunity to examine who this man was, and it was wonderful.
For its 25th anniversary, Hollywood cemented Star Trek's place in history at Mann's Chinese Theater. The cast was inducted into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, and Washington's National Air and Space Museum opened a Star Trek exhibit.
How does it feel to be where so many people have been before? Crowded, actually.
In his spare time, Shatner created a new science fiction franchise, Tech War. The best-selling books became a cable television series starring Greg Evigan, and Shatner directed some of the episodes.
Mark.
Action.
Working with Bill is like working in this incredible explosion. You know, I mean, this whole thing, I mean, he's got an unbelievable amount of energy he brings to this set.
What I'm really saying is...
Two of his daughters worked with Shatner on a Tech War episode.
I'm just having really so much fun with the director.
Excuse me, Miss Shatner. You're wanted on the set.
Who are you?
Although Shatner's relationships with his daughters was closer than ever, his second marriage to Marcy ended after 20 years in 1993. By now, Bill also had 2 grandsons to play with.
You can't tell which one's the kid. I mean, they just, roll over each other, and they're roughhousing and tickling, and he gets them so wound up, so they're just so wired by the time Dad leaves. I'm like, thanks, Dad.
On Star Trek's 30th anniversary, Shatner returned for Star Trek VII with Patrick Stewart of The Next Generation.
You don't need to do this, Solon. Teamwork?
By doing many of his own stunts, Shatner proved he still wasn't over the hill.
I've tried to keep myself limber, and I've tried to keep myself in shape, and for a great reason, because I'm playing Captain Kirk, and I wanted to be ready for each movie and not act my age.
Action!
The movie signaled the end for Captain Kirk, who died saving the galaxy.
Who the hell are you? Perfect, perfect.
What you have to remember is this is Star Trek. And one thing about Star Trek is that nobody ever dies on Star Trek. At least, not necessarily for good.
I think the amount of attention to this burial that's being paid, I think I'm dead. I think that rock will never come off that cave.
A chapter in his career had come to an end, but William Shatner had yet to face one of his most traumatic Star Trek legacies. William Shatner has created a refuge for himself far from Hollywood in Kentucky. He has a ranch named Belle Rêve, French for beautiful dream.
I love the horses so much. I'd love to be part of them. It's not relaxation so much as part of my life. Look at this beautiful baby. Look at the way the neck comes up.
Shatner has become a champion horseman, and since the early 80s, he has been breeding American saddlebreds. With 100-odd horses on his ranch, Shatner still manages to be intimately involved.
This is a glorious horse. In fact, I delivered him. I took this horse out of his mother's womb. The mother was having difficulty, and I pulled the baby out of his mother's womb and helped him stand and followed him his entire life.
His love of horses drew him to a unique charity which helps severely handicapped children. And every year, Shatner hosts a show to raise money for A Head with Horses.
Instead of clapping, why don't you just all wave to her, okay?
There's an interesting continuity in Bill's life, and that is the act of generosity that was involved in being a volunteer at a camp for disadvantaged children in Montreal, Canada, while in high school, for me is on the same continuum as a man who gives huge energy now to sponsoring a large horse show in Los Angeles each year to raise money. It's the same human being who's still giving of himself, and he does it in many more ways than I think people realize because he's not showy about it.
Most of his fans also don't know about an old injury that has come back to haunt him. Doctors think it was an on-set explosion in the mid-60s that caused a ringing in his ears called tinnitus. Both Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley also have the same disorder, although neither suffers as severely as Shatner.
Suicidal. I became desperate. And I thought, I can't stand this. And I began to think of ways to do myself in. And had worked it out where I could. You can't take a pain pill. If you've got chronic pain, you take a pain pill, at the end of the pain, for a few hours. You can't do that. There's no getting away from it. That can unravel your mind, and has.
Tinnitus has no cure. Specialists have taught Shatner how to isolate and ignore the constant sound of ringing, but it will never completely disappear.
It's getting louder as the years go by. I know it's getting louder. Causes me some apprehension.
William Shatner! He is a person who doesn't dwell on the injury, feeling, or pain, wants to get on with his life.
In November of 1997, William Shatner married for the 3rd time to former model Noreen Kidd. Leonard Nimoy was his best man. The Shatners tried to keep the wedding private, but the tabloids got pictures of the ceremony anyway.
We changed locations, did all that stuff, and we thought that we should have just hired the guy from the tabloids to take our pictures. We thought this guy did a better job than the person we hired.
The price of fame has been ongoing speculation and rumor about his personal life. And some of the stories are, well, from outer space.
I recently rebuilt my house and built a wonderful bathroom, a wonderful bathing area, and it overlooks the city, and it's really great. And put in a toilet, of course. I read in some renowned architectural magazine that I had built a toilet that looked like the seat on the Enterprise. I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely astonishing. They'll do anything.
Sometimes it seems Bill will do just about anything.
What'd you guys think of that?
Well, it was the most intense experience I've ever had. It was simply the most incredible, frightening, exhilarating experience I've ever had.
We were trying to spend a lot of time together and do as many fun things as we can. I think the latest thing is we got certified diving. He does a lot of things, and I join him for the things I kind of decide which things sound sane to me and which don't, and then those are the ones that I go on.
Shatner and his family have taken a safari deep into the jungles of Botswana. His love of animals put him into a tank with a killer whale and gave him a close encounter with Coco, the mountain gorilla that learned sign language from her keepers.
A mountain gorilla is gigantic, and I got scared. So the only thing I could think of was to say to Coco, "I love you, Coco." Because I knew that if I said, "I love you," then I'd start to feel I love you. It's a simple actor's trick. "I love you, Coco." I danced on her. "I love you, Coco. Coco, I love you." And I knew that my body was softening. "I love you, Coco." And I got right in front of her. I said, "Coco," and I looked into her deep brown eyes. I said, "I love you, Coco." She put her hand out and grabbed me by the balls.
William Shatner was not the first Hollywood actor to step into the future, but he was arguably the first to make it all seem so real. He imbued Captain Kirk with his own best qualities. And just like the starship captain, Shatner has managed to persevere through life's adversities while maintaining a childlike sense of wonder.
He's a pussycat. He's a very loving, very passionate, very caring, curious, excitable, excited, and interesting person. He does go where nobody's gone before.
We're a most promising species, Mr. Spock, as predators go. Did you know that?
I've frequently had my doubts.
I don't. Not anymore. Take us back to where we're supposed to be, Mr. Sulu. Warp Factor 1.
Warp Factor 1.